being the number one contender for the championship and being Triple H's lackey in Evolution. And the biggest thing that's happening in TNA Wrestling now is they're getting ready for their Slammiversary pay-per-view, which is supposed to be a milestone for TNA Wrestling, but I don't see it being a milestone when you have superstars of 7 or 8 years ago in the role of the number one contender for the championship. And who is MVP going to be able to put over as TNA champion? The only way he's going to be able to put over anybody in TNA Wrestling is if they beat MVP or he forms a faction to help him hold on to the TNA championship, which is why I think this is a huge mistake on TNA's part. If anything, some new superstar should be TNA champion. And in my opinion, when you compare the two superstars of 2006, 2007 of the new talent that when you talk about MVP and Mr. Kennedy, Ken Anderson of TNA Wrestling, was a far more impressive and a far more popular wrestler to put in contention for the championship. At least he got a one-on-one opportunity against Batista at the Royal Rumble in 2007, and that was the biggest match that Mr. Kennedy had been in his entire WWE career. From there, he goes to TNA Wrestling, gets put over as the TNA champion for a short time. I wish that he would have been put over as the TNA champion for longer than what he was. I had the privilege of working with a radio show that had the chance to interview Ken Kennedy a number of years ago, and he was so pleased with his position in TNA Wrestling. Now I question if he's happy or not with MVP taking the position he held a couple of years ago. But in my opinion, in terms of merchandise and popularity, Mr. Kennedy, Ken Anderson, call him what you want or say what you want about him, was the most popular superstar that TNA had and one of the most popular and fastest rising superstars in WWE in 2006, 2007. Really, the biggest thing that MVP did was hold the United States Championship for one of the longest reigns in the history of the WWE version of that championship. When you compare his reign to the reigns of Sting and Vader in WCW, I mean, those reigns were far more impressive than what MVP held the WWE version of the championship for. But that was his biggest career accolade. Apart from that, he held the tag team titles with Matt Hardy during their program, which was a great program, very entertaining, one of the best that MVP did. But those were really the only two major career accolades we saw from MVP in WWE, and I understand why WWE got rid of him. There's no way they could have ever gotten MVP over. In 2005, when he made his debut in October of that year at No Mercy, at the beginning of October, fans were chanting Power Ranger, making reference to the awful ring attire that MVP came out to the ring with, and his move arsenal wasn't really up to par with some other superstars who had made their debuts. Far more effective debuts in the WWE had to be the likes of Gail Kim when you talk about a woman for the women's division, or Carlito in 2004 winning the United States Championship from John Cena in his debut match. That was an incredible debut and one of the most effective debuts of a superstar in years. Chris Masters was another effective debut. They brought him in with the intentions, I believe, of making him WWE champion, gave him several opportunities against big names including Shawn Michaels and John Cena, was unable to do it. I think the biggest match Masters was in was an Elimination Chamber match in January of 2006. From there he goes on to feud with the likes of Shawn Michaels and tried at least to make a name for himself in the business, but again he had a far more effective debut than what MVP had. And when the fans started chanting Power Ranger towards MVP, obviously the confidence that WWE Creative had for MVP started to decline, and that's why we never saw MVP be given that golden opportunity to grab the brass ring in the WWE. Do I see him being back in WWE in the near future? No, I don't. Do I see him making a name for himself in TNA Wrestling? No, I don't. And I see the fans in TNA Wrestling eventually chanting Power Ranger towards him when he wins the TNA Championship. And Slammiversary, in my opinion, don't get me started on that. Slammiversary is looking terrible, especially with MVP teasing the fact that he's going to be the next TNA World Heavyweight Champion. I know a lot of people have been shitting all over this, and I definitely have a lot of respect for you for shitting all over the idea of MVP being the TNA World Heavyweight Champion, because there's nothing that you can really do with this. What it's going to come down to, if MVP does win the championship, is who MVP is booked in a program with. The superstars who challenge MVP for the TNA Championship are going to be the ones that get the program over, not MVP himself. Because what stands out about Antonio Banks, MVP, the performer, there's really nothing that stands out about him as the performer. And what it goes back to is how Dixie Carter has been running TNA Wrestling. She's been doing an awful job running TNA Wrestling. I will not give her the benefit of the doubt, especially after firing Hulk Hogan, forcing Hulk Hogan to quit after firing him on TNA Wrestling. He says, "You can't fire me, I quit." And where does Hulk Hogan go from TNA Wrestling? Back to WWE and signs a Legends contract with them to host WrestleMania 30, the biggest WrestleMania of all time, and do things for the WWE Network. Really excited to see what they've got coming up for Hulk Hogan, and I really appreciate how WWE have been trying to get back their superstars they previously lost to TNA Wrestling by giving them far better deals than what they had prior to them leaving the first time and going to TNA Wrestling. But a lot that had to do with that was the fact that Jerry and Jeff Jarrett were running TNA Wrestling, and compared to how TNA was ran back then compared to now, obviously those superstars were given a logical reason to want to leave WWE to be presented with a better working environment. And I don't see TNA having that better working environment when you talk about the male or female divisions in TNA Wrestling. Yes, they may have a better way of creating storylines, but they can't create better storylines in WWE now with how they're doing with their talents. I mean, how they're putting over their talents is absolutely atrocious, and there's nothing really interesting going on for TNA Wrestling. This is pathetic when you really sit back and put it into perspective, how the only one they can put on top in TNA Wrestling is MVP. I did a Google search of MVP's TNA career, and I saw a lot of photos that TNA had taken of MVP, some fan shot photos, some videos of him on YouTube. They were terrible. I mean, how they're promoting MVP is absolutely atrocious. It's a far better way of promoting MVP than what was done for him in the WWE, but again, you have to give WWE the benefit of the doubt and letting him go and giving him his release before MVP got worse in time in WWE, and you really have to try to give TNA a little bit of credit here for putting over MVP. At least they're trying to do something with MVP that WWE didn't, so I will give them the benefit of the doubt there, but I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon. And on a 5-star scale perspective, I'm going to rate MVP's chances of winning the TNA Championship at least 2.5 out of 5 stars. I don't see the chances of that happening anytime soon to come into fruition because of the lack of faith that every wrestling promotion who's hired MVP to wrestle for them have had a lack of faith in his character within months of his arrival in the company. It seems as if he's brought in with a lot of hype, and a lot of people expect big things out of MVP, but those big things never surface, and that is a huge factor as to why we don't see MVP doing anything with his character. He is a far cry from the likes of Carlito and Shelton Benjamin, who were phenomenal talents 10 years ago, but the biggest issue that I have with MVP is there's just no way he can get over, and if he becomes TNA World Heavyweight Champion, I see TNA heading on a downward spiral and being backed into a proverbial corner and an impenetrable and compromising position, which there's going to be no way out of because MVP can't cut a promo. He's no good on the microphone. He's not very talented in the ring. He may have been talented within the first few weeks of his career as a developmental superstar in WWE. Antonio Banks, outside of the MVP character, is a great individual. He's a very constant performer. It's just WWE just don't know how to book him. And TNA Wrestling, years after he was in WWE, don't know how to do the same thing with MVP. And that's why a lot of people are getting rid of MVP and wanting nothing to do with MVP. The only place I see MVP really fitting in here in 2014 is somewhere on the independent level in a company like Ring of Honor. Or the only thing that you can do with MVP is repackage his entire character and redistribute him on television when it comes to a form like WWE or TNA, because really this MVP character, this Montel Vontavious Porter, the only big thing he did was hold the U.S. title, the tag team titles for a brief amount of time, and feud with Kane in 2006 in the second ever Inferno match in WWE history. So MVP in all, when it comes down to it, really did nothing with his character, and I don't see why TNA Wrestling want to give him the championship. I see a couple of things coming from MVP winning the championship. One of the biggest things is low ratings for TNA Wrestling. I see low merchandise sales for MVP, and I see a lot of negative reviews being thrown the way of TNA Wrestling, and there are some fans out there that will be crazy enough and fucked up enough to give MVP the benefit of the doubt. And if you want to concur with my opinion or you want to go against it and post something in the way of negativity, I welcome that on our YouTube channel. You can leave us for us in the comments and let us know what you think of MVP being the TNA champion. Are you someone who wants to give MVP the benefit of the doubt? I am not, and I'm sure a lot of other people will concur with me, and more people will concur with me about the MVP character in TNA Wrestling than will go against my opinion, because I really don't see anything interesting in professional wrestling going on, and that's why we're hearing so many negative reviews on radio shows and reading so many negative reviews websites. If there were something more interesting going on with either major promotion in terms of WWE or TNA, then I could see why people will be writing positive reviews in columns and doing positive reviews for radio shows. But this is why I've been shooting on TNA Wrestling for the past number of weeks, because of how Dixie Carter, two major reasons here, because of how Dixie Carter is running TNA Wrestling and why MVP is up for the championship. I have no logical explanation as to why this is happening, and the only explanation, if I had to come up with one, if I had no other choice but to come up with an explanation as to why MVP is up for the title, it's because they have nobody else in TNA Wrestling. The majority of the phenomenal talent is in WWE now. The only issue that WWE have is they don't know how to book that talent, and MVP in TNA Wrestling is just headed into a dark corner, an impenetrable situation which there's no way out of. And it goes back to how Dixie Carter and how MVP is being put over, how Dixie Carter is running the show, how Dixie Carter is putting up with shit and running shit in TNA Wrestling and putting talents like MVP up for the championship, which there's really no need of or call for. And I understand why wrestling fans are as frustrated as what they are over talents like MVP. MVP could have been a big name back in 2007, 2008, especially with how he was number 3 on the top sellers of merchandise list in WWE, and he could still be a big name here in 2014, but he is no good. He is really a boring wrestler, and I can understand why people will be chanting boring towards MVP. There's nothing really that I can give MVP the benefit of the doubt for, and that's why I've comprised the shoot video on YouTube, because I really don't see MVP doing anything with his character in TNA Wrestling. If anything, MVP is just full of shit, and TNA Wrestling have nothing really to look forward to, only a shitty future if you keep putting people like MVP on top, superstars who were so yesterday. And if it's supposed to be about the new talent initiative, the biggest question that I have for TNA Wrestling and Dixie Carter is, what the fuck are you doing by putting superstars of 7 or 8 years ago on top in the company? I can understand you doing it within your first 2 or 3 years, but doing it here in 2014 when you have so many phenomenal wrestlers on your roster, if anything, it's really putting your great wrestlers in a compromised position and putting everyone on the back burner because you want to give somebody like MVP the benefit of the doubt just to keep them happy. And I really question how many people are actually and legitimately happy in TNA Wrestling as they were 2 or 3 years ago. I can't see anyone being happy with the direction of TNA Wrestling, and I wouldn't blame you if you quit TNA Wrestling at this point and you're tired of the same old shit repeating itself over and over again. And I'm referencing how Dixie Carter is running the show, putting shit together, and how MVP is always on top and teasing the fact he's the next TNA World Heavyweight Champion. I guess the only thing left to be said is God help us all. You can join the conversation on our Facebook page at HGW Entertainment, follow our show on Twitter at Jonathan Clarke 1, and watch us on our YouTube channel at Jonathan Clarke 22. If you have Google Plus, you can subscribe to us at HGW Entertainment and let us know what's on your mind. We welcome your comments and feedback. I want to know what you feel about MVP becoming the TNA champion and how he's always been put over as one of the biggest names in TNA Wrestling. Did a Google search the other day, couldn't find really anything beneficial or able to talk about towards MVP. Antonio Banks, the person, outside of the character, phenomenal individual. I just question the character MVP and how he's conducting himself with professional wrestling.